you're guaranteed to end up getting into.
Hello and welcome back, everybody, to round 4 of the second weekly of the Eternal Tournament Series Season 3. I am once again joined by LocoPojo, and we are jumping straight into the game.
Yeah, we've got a Cambrai deck with Copperhall Bailiff, always exciting to see. And some Sandstorm Titans are going to be following that up pretty nicely if Redworld draws its 4th power. And up against that, we also have a Stone Scar deck from Francois.
Yeah, and Francois having a little bit of a slow opening, but not going to be too detrimental to him. He's going to be able to just kind of take his time with this, not too worried about it.
Francois is running Stone Scar midrange with Pyro Knights and Statuary Maidens. The only 2 Umbran Reapers. The deck tops out at 5 with 2 Smuggler's Stash, 2 Soulfire Drakes, and 2 Umbran Reapers. So as a midrange deck, it is very firmly in that 3 to 4 slot. But we're seeing some quarries and some other cool cards inside.
Yeah, and that is an interesting split on the 5 drops that you pointed out there. Normally we see maybe like 4 Umbran Reapers, 2 Soulfire Drakes, but cutting down a couple of the Umbran Reapers to play some stashes to kind of give this deck some longevity.
Yeah, it's a pretty relevant thing to play sometimes. And Redworld, of course, his Cambrai deck, gonna have to get that 4th power to get things rolling, but lots and lots of big, powerful stuff. You got 4 Great Parliaments in the list and 4 Mystic Ascendants. So this is a deck that really, really very comfortable in the late game.
Yeah, and we see the first Sandstorm Titan coming down here, and Francois deciding whether or not he would like to annihilate this. It's a pretty solid annihilate target.
Yeah, as far as things go, the best target for Annihilate in the game is Sandstorm Titan. There's not really anything better that you're going to be wanting to target. He could be saving it for like an Iron Thorn if he's really, really worried about Iron Thorn's effect, but I think that there's enough problems dealing with Sandstorm Titan in this deck that you want to use your Annihilates on the Titans when you can.
Yeah, you definitely need to get those Titans down. Like they're just such a menacing threat. The big old 5/6 body is something that outside of Annihilate and Death Strike, Stone Scar often has a little bit of a tough time dealing with. Obliterate, another card that can help out, but I think you mentioned with the 5 drops that Obliterate's not in this list.
Yeah, that is correct. So not a lot of action on the board so far. The Steward of the Pest is probably the most menacing card to have been played so far. Sandstorm Titan will eventually come down and have some difficulty being answered, but Redworld is holding on to his Auric Bailiffs in anticipation of probably more threats to kill. Meanwhile, Francois is considering whether or not to play a Soulfire Drake or a Statuary Maiden and a Pyro Knight, but he ends up opting for the Soulfire Drake.
Yeah, and this is an interesting board state. I wonder if Redworld might pop off this turn with double Copperhall Bailiffs to try and soak up some of the damage, or what he's going to see as the optimal line of play here. Martial Ironthorn into a power isn't necessarily terrible. But
he has to deal with all of this aggressive damage coming in. There's not an Obliterate, as we've established, so he is safe from most things as far as like overall damage is concerned. But it's just a little bit tough to deal with the Soulfire Drake right now when you don't have the Desert Marshal in hand.
Yeah, that is very true. And we're going to see if he can mount some sort of comeback against Francois, because Francois' aggression is very great right now. We see the Torch hanging out in hand as well as the Pyro Knight, both going to cause headaches for Redworld in the future, probably.
If Francois wants, he can pop the Statuary Maiden down here, but it looks like he's preserving it, just making sure that he's not going to get blown out by a harsh rule. Attacking with both units in and getting a trade for the Iron Thorn. The Pyro Knight here allows him to get a little bit of extra pressure, and he does have the 6 power necessary to make that happen.
Yeah, he does have the power indeed, although Redworld not in a terrible position anymore. He's kind of managed to stave off that aggression now that he's been able to ground the Drake. And we know Francois is hanging out with the Power, Torch, and Statuary Maiden. So we will see if he can find some combination of those cards where he can push around this. I have a feeling we'll see a Desert Marshal come down on this Soulfire Drake.
It seems pretty inevitable, yeah. Pyro Knight can become big enough to threaten the Sandstorm Titan, so if Francois wants to, he could end up doing a little bit more, but he does get the Charchain Flail, which allows him to would allow him to effectively kill this Sandstorm Titan if it weren't for the fact that the Desert Marshal is in hand. Instead, it looks like he's going to get a Desert Marshal to the face and an effective 2-for-1 from Redworld.
Yeah, that
or
actually
1.5-for-1.
Yeah, works out pretty well for Redworld there. And now that he has the Copperhall Bailiffs, he can also just make these make the units on Francois' side small enough that he can really start pushing through with this Titan and even these Copperhall Bailiffs next turn.
Yep, looks like there's a lot of decent aggression here. The Pyro Knight still gets to become big, but not big enough to deal with Sandstorm Titan, which means that Francois is going to be on the defensive for a couple of turns. If he gets his Umbran Reapers, that'll allow him to push a little bit more damage through. I think overall, he's just got to get rid of this Sandstorm Titan somehow, and not having an answer to that right now could be pretty critical.
Yeah, no Obliterate or Annihilate to be found, though we do see a Steward of the Past come down, so that will start stalling the board for Francois. Redworld is pretty de-incentivized from attacking in board state. The Steward hanging out to clean up.
Yeah, neither player really wants to move here, and usually that favors the deck with the Flame Blasts inside. And I believe that Francois' deck does, in fact, have Flame Blasts. Yes, it's got 3 of them. So over time, Francois can push through and get a little bit of extra damage here. He's actually pushing with the Steward of the Past, which is an aggressive play, but not necessarily a wrong one.
No, definitely not going to work out to be the wrong play here. Kind of liking it. Going to start pushing some damage, really making Redworld decide if he's ready to expend this Titan on the defensive end.
Yep, and there aren't really any other better options. The Copperhall Bailiffs can't double block the 3/5 on account of the fact that they just don't have enough power. So one of those things where Copperhall Bailiff is just missing a little bit of stat line to get through to these larger units. But with Francois quarrying, like, this is starting to look pretty bad for Redworld. He's drawn pretty much nothing but power. If he ends up hitting like a Great Parliament or some sort of big spell, then he could end up in a much better position. But right now he's really struggling.
Yeah, he's really going to need to find some gas here. He's either going to need a harsh roll to clean up and then a big top deck on the follow-up, or possibly something, like you said, like a Great Parliament to actually give him some sort of... since he is on Big Combria, I have to imagine there's Mystic Ascent in this board. That might also be a card that can help him out, generate some extra card advantage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Francois quarrying into Quarry, digging through his deck and sort of just demonstrating the power of cards as he searches for answers. He'll get to a better solution to his problems very, very quickly. If he manages to get a Flame Blast picked up, then he should be able to secure lethal with just 1 more power drop, and might even be able to secure it with a little bit more than that if he attacks with Steward of the Past. So what he ends up getting is going to be pretty tricky.
Yeah, I'm wondering what he picked up, because it looked for a second there like he was considering attacking with more than just the Steward of the Past this turn, which leads me to believe that maybe he's got like a torch or something floating around, but we'll see based on his attack pattern.
Yep, he does end up attacking with the Steward, which encourages the block from Sandstorm Titan, of course. Redworld really can't afford to lose more health than this. He's so close to Flame Blast range that it's really crucial that he does not get hit. That Argent Port Instigator comes down late. I am not sure I agree with that. I think that if he played it early, he would have gotten 1 extra point, and then he wouldn't have to play a power to Flame Blast for the win.
Yeah, this is very true. It's important to make a note of those a little bit of extra chip damage that you can generate off of cards like Argent Port Instigator. Over time, a card like Argent Port Instigator can act as a decent-sized burn spell over the... And, so he does have Obliterate in the deck, it looks like.
Okay. Did I misread? Oh, there's 3 of them. Yeah, I apologize. I misread the list. There are, in fact, 3 of them.
Not a problem. It does make a lot more sense. Obliterate, one of the better cards in Stone Scar, just puts in a lot of work. And I mean, we even see it there at the end. Obliterate plus Torch for the direct lethal, not even having to actually swing any units across the board. Get in with some spells.
That little bit of extra damage, that little bit of extra burn really, really helps with the push. So a lot of good stuff there. And yeah, plenty of good 5-drops for this particular setup. All right, so we've got Bailiff Carry Me is the name of this Combre deck, as we are seeing now. And we're looking at the sideboard as some Scorpion Wasps are getting added, and other things are getting considered as possible includes or removal.
Yeah.
Probably X2 in the deck. That's pretty exciting.
Ooh, looks like he's trying to bring in some Healer's Cloaks.
I like that decision. Healer's Cloak is a very strong card against Stone Scar decks and against aggro decks in general. Anytime that you can gain like a really substantial amount of health, Healer's Cloak will heal for 8 off of a Sandstorm Titan, and also give it a stat line that's above Obliterate. So if you can hold onto a Sandstorm Titan for more than one turn, then giving it a Healer's Cloak is just really quite brutal. And it also works well on Owls and Iron Thorns and Ascendants. So a lot of different ways to gain a lot of health.
Yeah, notably also works well in Sandstorm Titan if you're on the play, since your opponent can't respond with that Obliterate necessarily. Obviously, Annihilate's always going to clean it up, but if they can't respond with the Obliterate immediately, sometimes you can get that Healer's Cloak off and, like you said, just generate this massive unit that really can't be taken down by anything besides hard removal.
Yeah, it's also a good way to seal off the game if you're being locked down by Steward of the Past or Statuary Maiden. Mystic Ascendant here, of course, just like can become like a really, really big dude, and then you can just gain like a stupid amount of life off of it when you Healer's Cloak. It's a fun time.
Yeah, and that life gain is really important in this matchup. That's definitely why we saw them come deck, is you want to just preserve that life total against the Stone Scar decks. It's so easy for them to just amass a suite of burn between Obliterates, Torches, and Flame Blast to finally blows the game out, like we saw there, where there was a little bit of a back and forth board stall, even though the Stone Scar deck from Francois looked like he was going to take it regardless. He was just able to put the game completely in his favor with that last Obliterate picked up.
Yep. With all of the silences and big units in Redworld's deck, I think Redworld stands a pretty even chance of getting through against this deck. It'll be dependent on Francois's sideboards and how well they affect Redworld's game plan. We know that there are 3 Voprex, the Great Ruins, in this sideboard, and I hope that they come in because they're pretty strong against big Combre decks.
Yeah, definitely going to be important. We are back into the second game here. Redworld going to have to see if he can find a way to make up for that game 1 loss, which can be sometimes difficult against these Stone Scar decks. They can be very powerful and aggressive.
Yeah, the 2 Desert Marshals in Redworld's hand give him a pretty decent amount of extra stuff to play with. He'll be able to silence a lot of the relevant threats from Francois, including Champion of Chaos, Statuary Maiden, the Soulfire Drakes, and Umbran Reapers, of course. If he can get the Soulfire Drakes and Umbran Reapers, those are the most critical threats to answer, but if you can get rid of some of the early stuff too, that's also not bad at all. So the silences are always going to be relevant against this type of deck.
Yeah, they definitely are. Champion of Chaos, great target to silence. Even sometimes an Argenport Instigator you have to silence, but if you can hit one of the big ones like Umbran Reaper or Soulfire Drake, it comes in a lot of help. Provides an excellent way to just handle those cards very cheaply. And
yeah, Redworld playing his Knight Chancellor Seraph, actually foregoing the play on his Knight Chancellor Seraph and instead opting to just have a Desert Marshal up. This is an interesting play. It basically just leaves him empty on board, but it allows him to set up better harsh rules and then Seraph afterwards. So there's some interesting options there. He's playing for value and not for health, and I'm curious if that's going to work well against the Stone Scar deck. The Sabotage comes out and cuts the harsh rule, so it might end up being very, very bad for him.
yeah, we'll probably see the harsh rule come out. But yeah, actually, he does take the Great Parliament, and I did think that might have been a consideration from Francois. He might just feel like he can get there with 1 or 2 units and always put Redworld in a position where harsh rule is really uninteresting to play. Like,
Yep.
harsh ruling a single unit away is most of the time unattractive enough that you don't want to do it unless absolutely necessary, and it may allow him to just beat down here. But actually having the second sabotage,
And has a second sabotage. Yep. So both Harsh Rule and Parliament are out of Redworld's deck. And with those two completely set up, that's going to make Redworld's life pretty hard. He probably has to play the Seraph now. He has Protect for it, so it's going to be alive at least. But it's not any sort of match for Champion of Chaos unless he Desert Marshals, at which point he can block effectively and will still get the Seraph torched if the torch exists.
yeah, I have to imagine that's what we're going to see here. Is we're going to see this Desert Marshal come down for the silence and try and pick up the 4. Although I would hope Francois has a torch, since he's known about this Desert Marshal for quite a while.
Yeah, the Protect here is a very, very good option. It's hard to say what's best here, but Francois does get a Champion of Chaos down and then a Pyro Knight, and he's got a Flame Blast for 1, which using Flame Blast as a removal spell is totally acceptable in this deck if you're trying to push through. And with Redworld at as much health as he is, Francois definitely wants to just support his plan a little bit better and get his aggression in with units.
Yeah, and unfortunately, he's going to see this second champion get cleaned up. But I have to say, back to the Flame Blast, but I did kind of like that, knowing that Redworld probably sideboarding in his protects, and we do see one hanging out in Redworld's hand. So that Flame Blast was very well timed, since Redworld happened to be out of power.
Yep. Redworld has played fairly well here. Like, keeping the Seraph out of harm's way for this long has been pretty decent. He's now got the Protect for it. He can harsh roll whenever he wants, but he's mostly just got a commanding board position. So Francois is really going to have to play some more gas to get things going. And what do you know? There's a Smuggler stash. It doesn't get much, 2 Silence Champion of Chaoses, but one of them is discounted, so he's going to be able to play both of them next turn.
Yeah, at least he has that, but I'm honestly starting to feel like it's not going to be enough. Francois' problem this game was just not putting up enough early pressure. Last game, he put on just a mass amount of pressure, and it really overwhelmed Redworld at the beginning, and it gave him the ability to draw towards those burn-style outs, but we don't see that happening in this game, since Redworld is still sitting at a very comfortable 21 life.
I think this is the risk of playing Sabotages as a sideboard card, is that while you do get rid of a lot of relevant cards, you still actually have to be playing like aggressive threats and like getting your aggression going. So like ditching the Harsh Rule was definitely important, but he could have also just gotten the Harsh Rule out of his opponent's deck with decent champion management. So it's hard to say how well this is going to work out for him.
Interesting. And I think there was a prompt there after the Annihilate Protect combo. He might have had one. So I think Francois is holding a Torch, which means his last card is just Torch. And I don't think that that's going to give him an opportunity to get out of this game immediately.
He can double block the Sandstorm Titan, so he's not dead on board, but Mystic Ascendant is a very critical card, and if he doesn't end up with an Annihilate or a Death Strike or an Obliterate on time, then he's going to have a lot of problems pushing through and getting this victory. A Vanquish from Redworld just deepens the trouble that Francois is in.
Yeah, that's actually a pretty big pickup here, because we just saw the Pyro Knight get activated. Francois spending his whole turn to activate Pyro Knight, completely powered out right here, or powered off, as you might say. And it's an option. Redworld elects to hold the Vanquish, trying to wait maybe for something a little bit juicier. Or maybe he's just going for like a full board swing and a few turns harsh rule. It's hard to say where his line of play, like the optimal line of play here, lies.
Yeah, okay, so Francois clearly demonstrating he has a Torch. Attacking with just 2 units and leaving one back as a defender against the Sandstorm Titan, or maybe he's not finished declaring his attacks yet. So, but I like holding the Vanquish here because Francois has already demonstrated that he's not willing to attack with the 6/5 and trade in. So that Pyro Knight is not actually all that threatening to him right now.
Yeah, not particularly. The 6-5 isn't going to be putting him, even if it crashes once, maybe even twice, it's not particularly a threatening clock anyway. So Redworld definitely in a comfortable position here, and looks like he's just going to elect to play this one out real slow until he finds something to crack this board stall.
Yeah. So we have a Vara's favor to crack one of the Desert Marshals. I think, like, yeah, Red World's save of the Vanquish is definitely a pretty good idea here. Like, you aren't seeing aggression here. Red World can trade pretty evenly and hold the board, and unless Francois does something to basically influence that Sandstorm Titan, spending more cards out of his hand, Redworld gets to stay at like a comfy 15, and then he can harsh rule and have a vanquish up for a later threat. So that's definitely, he's got the long game in mind, and that's probably going to work out pretty well for him.
Yeah, I definitely think it will, depending on what Francois is still holding. Uh, it depends on what these last two cards are. If even one of them is power, Francois is definitely kind of on the back foot at this point, having that board cleared, since Red World's hand is so powerful with the Mystic Ascendant and power to start drawing cards and powering that up.
Yeah, the risk here is like double Flame Blast. That's the one reason why you want to get rid of the Pyro Knight early, but it doesn't look like Francois has it because he doesn't play anything this turn, so he's probably in a lot of trouble from here on out. Hey, Voprex!
Hey, and this is a card that you have taken to a little bit of success, Pojo, in the Season 2 Invitational, I believe.
I think it's a very strong card in this matchup. Not only does he develop a threat, he also effectively deals with that Mystic Ascendant. Like a single bomb that forces 2 cards removal, like as a 7 cost 2 for 1, that's perfectly reasonable. And sometimes you can get 4 for 1s or 3 for 1s and just do a ridiculous amount of damage with Voprex. Right now, it's not going to be enough to push through, but he certainly does get his value out of it.
Yeah. Lucky for Red World, he was holding that Vanquish, or that Voprex would have been an absolute nightmare for him to have dealt with.
Yep. It all comes down to like that smart Vanquish hold. I think that like overall he's just in a pretty strong position from staying and holding on to that long game card. It's just a matter of how much burn Francois can pull out of his deck.
Yeah, and he's going to have to pull a lot out, seeing that the Combrai healer's coming down, giving Red World extra 3 health, and now he's at 18, and this pushes Francois on power plus double Flame Blast for lethal. Ooh, and Voprex coming down, but unfortunately just going to hit a Sigil.
That's not too bad. It at least prevents him from getting to the 12 cost Parliament a little bit earlier, and keeps Ironthorn under wraps, a little bit less likely to hit that 15. But overall, right now, Voprex here isn't terribly threatening. Ironthorn, unfortunately, draws another power, so if he continues to draw power, he can get up to that 15 and make a really serious threat happen, and Francois does not want to draw any more Voprexes after this one.
Yeah, and interesting decision that Red World decides to offer the trade here.
Yeah, I think it's reasonable considering how much damage it pressures. Because Francois does not take the trade, Francois can no longer do all that much. And that is a triple Great Parliament off of that power. If he had drawn that a turn earlier, it would only be 2, but I think that this is probably game.
Is Francois playing Stray the Pass?
Stray.
What is the new card?
Stray into Shadow.
Stray into Shadow.
There are no Stray into Shadow in Francois' main board, and he does not have any in the sideboard either.
Okay.
So no way for him to deal with this rather large series of threats, although it would have been a pretty solid choice against the Great Parliament as a sideboard card. Francois' sideboard is actually just 4 cards: Furnace Mage, Plague, Sabotage, and 3 Voprexes. And there's just 4 of each of them apart from the Voprexes. So, looks like Red World takes this game, and are we going into game 3, or was that 2-0?
Yeah, no, that was Red World getting it back 1-1. Francois having that early burn game earlier, so we are going to see them jump to game 3 here in just a second, seeing Red World make a few sideboard adjustments.
Yeah, there's a decay coming in here to answer some sort of weapon or relic. I'm not actually sure what it is that he's answering. Charge Hand Flail, perhaps? And possibly, I think that's it. There's only Charge Hand Flail on the deck. So I'm not sure if I agree with this decay, but if you want to answer a Charchain Flail, it's a pretty solid way to gain some health.
Yeah, I guess he's playing the decay around maybe like the smuggler's stash aspect of being able to bring the Charchain Flails back, but I have to slightly agree. I don't think it's the strongest sideboard, but it will put in work in certain situations. So it's definitely not a dead card.
Yeah, you can use it to like essentially gain health in a situation where you would lose a lot of health. So as a one of, it's certainly acceptable, and there's still other targets for it. You can get statuary maiden pulls off of it if Francois hasn't sided those out.
Certainly. So we see a Redworld's opening hand. Got the Desert Marshal already to interact with the 5 drops in the Champion of Chaos, and we see a Seraph that he can get down on turn 3.
Yeah,
Start putting up that early pressure.
Indeed, that Desert Marshal, like you always want to have those in your opening hands against these types of decks. You don't need to have too many, but especially since you're trying to hold on to them for Umbran Reaper and Soulfire Drake, but they're pretty helpful against a lot of Francois' cards. And this time around, he's going to have to decide whether or not he wants to play that Seraph, and he decides against it again. This is like a specific game plan that he's clearly following, where he does not play the Seraphs early, even though they could offer him like some defensive advantage here and keep his health total nice and high. It worked out for him last time, so we'll see if it works out for him this time.
Yeah, I have a feeling he's going to need to get this Seraph down here, and indeed, Redworld does agree. He wants to get it into play. Francois, obviously holding the torch, though, going to be able to make some sort of value trade on this Seraph, potentially.
Yeah, and you have like that is the strength of this play, right? Is that he's waiting for that protect, and now he can not only trade Seraph down with or trade up with Seraph, so like actually get a like 3/3 with the Seraph, but then he can also block a torch and essentially get that 3/3 for free. So it's a good way to get extra card advantage against Francois. You do lose some health in the bargain, which makes you vulnerable to Flame Blast and Obliterate. But there's really only 6 of those in Francois' deck, and if he's not putting on enough pressure, this long game plan, I think, will serve Redworld very well, and is a sign of a savvy player, I would say.
Yeah, certainly. Francois should know that the protect is here, though. He should be smart enough to play around it, and in fact decides not to go to combat and try for the torch trick, since he does recognize Redworld multiple times having that response window with only 1 power open, meaning that protect is most certainly the card he is holding.
So now both players are playing for card advantage, which I think still plays into Redworld's type of game. Francois really needs to be able to push some sort of damage here, and the fact that he just doesn't have access is making it a little bit difficult. He tossed a Pyro Knight with that quarry, which indicates that he maybe doesn't value them too highly, but there weren't actually all that many good sides for Francois, so I guess he's holding on to them anyways.
Yeah, and we'll see if he wants to actually go for the torch trick here. He should recognize the protect is here, so I'm hoping he has a second torch to follow this up with.
Second torch would be ideal, but he might just want to like get that out of the way. Yeah, no, looks like he ends up just bonking on the head, and there is a Flame Blast for 2. And once again, using that Flame Blast early to get rid of the Seraph, not a bad deal. As long as he can keep pressuring in with units, it'll work out in his favor.
Yeah,
Sandstorm Titan comes down.
He's going to have a hard time with the Sandstorm Titan, assuming he doesn't have the Annihilate lurking in his hand. Now that he got that rid of that Flame Blast, Francois having some serious power issues, though. That's really one of the things that's dragging his deck down a lot right now.
Titan's a tough card to deal with in Stone Scar. This is why you try to run like a lot of different ways to deal 6 damage. The Mauler's deck runs Mauls and Charchain Flail and Obliterate and Flame Blast. And Francois does have the Annihilate, but does not use it aggressively. He uses it defensively. So I think Redworld is taking control of this game pretty significantly if Francois is not wanting to attack in for any reason.
Yeah, certainly. When the Stone Scar deck starts playing defensively, you have to imagine that you have stabilized the board. Though we do see Francois trying to get aggressive with that torch and pushing in. And, I mean, he has pushed a little bit of damage. And to his credit, Redworld has really not got a lot going on. For as good of a board position as he had taken a turn or two ago, he really finds himself lacking on gas. And even though Francois is a little bit power screwed right now, it doesn't look like it's going to matter as long as Redworld keeps flooding.
Yeah, if Redworld keeps flooding and Francois just draws a power, he should be in pretty good shape. He's got to hit 5 to get some of his major threats, but we know that his hand is all gas, so this is a big problem if he actually ends up being able to play any of it. Meanwhile, Redworld pulling Find the Ways, pulling lots and lots of fixing. A great Parliament here is just, again, like a really, really big problem, and there's 4 of them in Redworld's deck. So the longer this stall with power goes, the better off Redworld is.
Yeah, definitely. And Redworld's going to need to hit something like a big Great Parliament. As long as Francois continues to not draw it into any power, Redworld can easily take over the game with a big Great Parliament, like you were saying. But unfortunately for him, it doesn't look like he's found anything. And Francois finally hitting his 4th power, probably going to get like a Maiden or a Steward of the Past down here, I imagine, and start putting some threatening numbers on the board.
All right, yeah, Statuary Maiden does pressure enough. Knight Chancellor Seraph here, unfortunately, instant activation with 11 power. That's the sweet spot that you really, really want. Francois can keep attacking with Statuary Maiden to continue the pressure and just like try to get himself into obliterate range. He gets a Suffocate off on Seraph, which is very critical. Dealing with that Seraph is an important part of his overall game plan. And what he decides to do with that Stone Cudgel is going to be interesting.
Yeah, I would like to have seen him. Okay, and actually, Redworld goes ahead and makes the block right away. So we see 2 cudgels going back to Francois' side, and Redworld's going to be in a really tough position here. And ooh, that's a big silence. Being able to silence the Soulfire Drake is really huge here.
Yeah, there's a Voprex in Francois' hand, but it's not going to be cast anytime soon. So that does prevent a lot of the potential lethal that could be showing up. Francois tosses a Flame Blast into his discard pile, which suggests that he has a lot more burn in tow.
Yeah,
or that he just got another Flame Blast.
Yeah, I think honestly that might have been double Flame Blast there. That's what I'm inclined to believe, is that Francois saw double Flame Blast, so he just pitched one and went ahead and fired off the second one.
That's about the worst thing to happen when you're facing down 2 Flame Blasts and just or like with a Quarry. That's probably like the worst thing that can happen to you with a Quarry. But Obliterate finishes the game off, and that'll have Francois taking the game 2-1.
Yeah, and we do see that Stonescar deck getting there in the end, and that is really the power of the Stonescar deck. Again, showcasing that last matchup is the ability to just use burn to not only clean up your opponent's health, but also clean up the units on the board and actually just clear a path for your little chip damage, two damage here, 3 damage here, 4 damage here, and eventually build a very real clock against your opponent.
Yep, Redworld played the best he could. He needed to get any number of a bunch of good cards that could get him sizable amounts of advantage, and he pulled the Seraph instead of the Great Parliament, but Seraph did end up getting him a lot of extra advantage out of that. I think that overall, like, that was a really strong showing from both players, and it was good to see those 2 decks jump up against each other.
Yeah, nice to see them clash on the battlefield. Unfortunately, Stonescar taking it in this case. Not super unfortunately, but I know Stonescar has kind of been the front runner in most people's minds for the deck that is what you need to beat when you show up to these tournaments, and it's kind of reflected like that on the ladder. There's definitely a lot of Stonescar on the ladder, so everybody's kind of gunning for it. So.
Yep. I mean, Big Combre is also the other big tournament list after I Read Minds took it through and beat some Stonescar decks out. So both of those decks are professional, like really solid decks being played by very solid players, I would say. So congratulations to both of them. And we're looking forward to seeing Francois continue to advance. And hopefully we might see some more Combre as well.
Yeah, probably we'll see some more Combre as well as some more Stonescar. They definitely have been a decent. They definitely have been having a decent showing, and the deck lists today reflect that way. But we are actually going